Student ministry is tough sometimes, and there are a lot of reasons why you've probably thought about leaving, but there are many more reasons why you should stay. So, how do we stay? What are the things that we need to focus on in order to stick around for the long haul? Well, get ready because our guest on this episode of Student Ministry Connection has not only pushed through himself, but he's also written a book on what he's learned, and it is fantastic. Let's get ready to connect and grow. Welcome to Student Ministry Connection. My name is Steve Cullum, and as I think back, it is crazy to think that I've been serving in student ministry for well over half my life. It feels like just the other day when I was starting out as a volunteer and then getting my first youth pastor job. But the truth is that at this point, it's been nearly 26 years. If you've listened to this podcast for a while, you've probably heard me talk about my youth pastor, who is at his church, my home church, until his untimely death, where he had been serving, I believe, for 35 years or more. That was my picture of ministry. That's what it's all about, to go where God has called you and stay until he says you're done or calls you home. And as I think about all the other youth leaders who have been mentors to me and set the example for me, they've also served for many, many years. Some of them at different churches and ministries, but they're still going into their 60s, 70s, and 80s. Maybe you're listening and you want to be like that too. I mean, think of all the impact that you can have on the next generation and families if you're serving that long. If we're only in it for a couple years, we're barely able to scratch the surface. And yet, I know from my research and that of others that there are so many churches and ministries looking for good student ministry leaders right now because many are getting out of the game. So today we're talking longevity with Jody Livingston, a friend of mine who not only podcasts about it on a regular basis, but has also recently written a book about it called Staying Power: 10 Essentials for Longevity in Youth Ministry. Before we jump into that conversation with Jody, though, I want to pause and just remind you that we are so close to our 10th anniversary for this podcast. In fact, it's actually this next episode. And while I'm still open to your suggestions on what you would like to see happen, here are two things that I'd like to do for that episode. Number one, I'm planning on having some giveaways. So make sure you listen to that anniversary episode to learn how to win, but also pay attention to our social media. And number two, I'd like to highlight some of you. So please consider sending in a short voice memo or written email to studentministryconnection@gmail.com by January 27th, 2026. You can share your favorite episode, how the podcast has impacted you and your ministry, or maybe how it got you connected with others in student ministry. It's always great to read your reviews on the podcast sites, but I thought this would be a great way to highlight you, which beyond God himself is really the reason why this podcast exists. Jody, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Hey man, I'm excited to be here. You were on mine. We've been talking about this, so it's fun to
Yeah.
finally connect on this side of things.
Yeah, finally make it happen. So yeah, we've gotten to know each other a little bit. I've read your book, which we'll get into in just a bit, but I'd love to start off with, like we start with a lot of our guests, story, your testimony, how you met Jesus in the beginning, but also how you got started in student ministry.
Yeah, so I grew up in East Tennessee, lived on a cattle farm there. My grandmother took me to church growing up and was relentless about that. So prayed to receive Christ pretty early in life, 8 years old at a vacation Bible school, a little brick church there. And then, kind of was plugged in for a while until probably late middle school, high school, really in kind of the youth group years, honestly. And we had moved across town, which in that town is forever away, even though probably not really. So it just wasn't as much of an opportunity to be plugged in and involved there. My best friend died in a car accident my junior year of high school.
Mm.
And so I was not in church at the time. And it really kind of caused me to question a lot of things. Obviously, I was
Sure.
very angry at God in that season. Spent the summer of that. It was in April, my junior year of high school. Spent summer really at a cemetery, pretty much
Mm.
just yelling at the Lord and anybody who walked by.
Mm.
and had a friend my senior year of high school who had started this little prayer group that met before school and was relentless in inviting me to come. I agreed to go if she would stop inviting me. And so I did. I went the first time. It met before school. I couldn't get to school on time, let alone get there early for a prayer group. But I went because I wanted her to stop asking. And I don't know what happened, but man, I listened to them pray for me and pray for the school and pray for the teachers. And I just kept going. They met every day. And after a couple weeks, they said, "Hey, look, man, we love that you're coming, but we're all taking turns leading a little devotion here. And if you're going to keep coming, you're going to need to do a devotion." And which such a teenage thing to say. I didn't want to get kicked out of prayer group. So I was like, okay, fine. I'd never done anything like that before. I stayed up all night working on that little devotion. I don't even know what I said, what it was from. I'm sure it was heretical, but none of us knew because we were all a bunch of teenagers.
Right.
And but I don't remember what I said, but I remember the feeling of giving it and just feeling like, man, something in me came alive that I didn't know existed. And I had planned on doing architecture to that point. Around that same time, was told by my drafting teacher that, "Hey, Jody, you really suck at math, and that's important in architecture. So you need to really think about maybe a different path." And so I was driving at that point, my senior year, obviously. And so I'd been back in church at this point for a few weeks, and same pastor that I grew up with was still pastoring there. So, I mean, just incredible legacy of longevity there.
Mm.
And I just remember sitting in church one Sunday and going, man, I think that's what I want to do, what he's doing. And so I went and talked to him, and he was like, "Nah, you should run from this," And I was like, what the heck? I'm paying this guy the biggest compliment of his life. I
Right.
couldn't remember a single person being called to ministry. And my family was super involved in the
Mm.
church, except for me and my extended family and everything.
Mhm.
And so he said, spend some time praying. And when you feel like, you can do nothing else and be obedient and committed and fulfilled, then you come back and talk to me. So that's what I did. Spent a few weeks doing that, and then came back and said, "No, this is it." And so he jumped in and said, "Well, we got work to do." So him and another retired pastor named Jim Hoff in my church really pulled me aside, started teaching me how to study and preach and teach. And so as senior high school, man, I'm preaching probably once a month on Sunday nights in this little church. And
Wow.
then they said, "Hey, you should go to school." And I was like, "What? You gotta go to school for this? Holy crap." And so ended up going to Southeastern Seminary in Wake Forest, North Carolina to start my undergrad, and met my wife there. Lived there for about 12 years, served on a couple different church staffs there. And yeah, and he's found my way into student ministry there, kind of duped into it, like many of us probably. And just realized that this was my heart and passion. I think I was burdened for my friend. I didn't remember ever telling him about Jesus, and burdened for my classmates as a senior in high school. And that carried forward to that. And so 12 years there, about 9 in Georgia, Atlanta area. And then we've been here 7 years and on the left coast in Southern California. And so 26 all told with everything there, just running at this next generation, still doing it. And then podcast or started a blog, maybe, I don't know, 15, it's probably longer than that, 15 years ago, 18. So it feels like forever ago.
Yeah.
Called it thelongerhaul.com, and then podcast after that, and still doing that. And obviously the book you mentioned that came
Mhm.
out last June, coaching youth pastors and doing whatever I can to invest in those who are running.
Wow. Wow. Well, thank you for all that you've done. That's such a cool story. Sorry about your friend, though. That's
Yeah.
horrible.
It's a weird thing, right? Like you look back now and you say, I'm so thankful for that. Like I've
Sure.
said it to people, like it was, God
Yeah.
used the deepest tragedy of my life at that time, especially,
Mm,
and has used it in ways I could imagine. That Romans 8,
sure.
man, watching that lived out, he's using this for
Yeah.
your good. I would certainly not be in ministry if it weren't for that. I don't know if I would have come back to the Lord without that.
Mm,
And so it's been, yeah, it's wild how
sure.
something that you wouldn't expect God uses.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure he's probably used it as you're connecting with teenagers and they're going through really difficult things as well. And not that you can, we don't know
Yeah.
exactly what they're going through, but you can at least connect and empathize in a way that I can't because I didn't lose my best friend when I was in high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and we know if you do this long enough, you're going to have kids in your youth ministry.
Yep.
They're going to die. Car accidents,
Yep.
suicide. more and more suicide, it seems, but
Mhm.
you're walking out a reality of students who are losing people. And so we've all experienced it to a certain extent if we've done this
Mhm.
long enough, to different degrees. It just helps you. It gives you some perspective like, okay, God's going to use this. I don't know how, I don't know where. I wouldn't have wished it, don't want it, but it's here. And
Yeah.
so I'm just going to trust and allow
Yeah.
my head to steer my heart and let what I know to be true guide what I feel to be true
Mhm.
and walk that out.
Cool. Well, thank you for that. And thanks
Yeah.
for this book. I
Yeah.
we talked about it a while back and everything. I knew it was coming out, and we've talked, offline a few times about it and stuff. But knowing, you've been in youth ministry, student ministry for 26 years. So, and you've had your podcast, your blog. So I know a little bit that, that probably all stemmed from that. But what eventually, made you say, I want to write a book about this?
Yeah. Well, let me just say Miss Campbell would be shocked that I wrote a book, right? My high school English teacher would be like, what the heck? I think it really is kind of so it goes back to even the blog. Like I started the blog because I started looking around at a lot of my friends who are in ministry. And I was bivocational for the first 11 years of ministry. And it was hard. But it was so good and rich. And I was watching the benefit of staying. And I'm watching my friends bounce from church to church to church to church in these, even in full-time roles, and just thinking, man, if you could just stay put,
Mhm.
like, I want to help you. And realizing, I mean, I was a youth pastor at 18. No one should do that, but I did it. And I didn't know anything. I was reading whatever I could find. I was going to whatever conference. I was trying to grab coffee with whoever I could. There just wasn't anybody who was really there to be like, "Hey, here's how to navigate. Here's what you need to know. Here's what you have to do. Here's some things you need to be thinking about." And so the blog really started that, is that I'm writing to 18-year-old Jody of like, here's the things I wish I knew when I was starting. I wanted to say more than I could in the blog, and so the podcast came out of that. And then ironically, in a full circle moment, kind of felt like I want to do more than I could say in a podcast episode. So I'm going to go back to writing and really had laid out a book that I have not written, a broader book. This book actually started as a chapter in that book.
Hmm.
And as it began to flesh out more and more, was like, oh, this is more significant than I thought it would be. And so ended up writing this one and intentionally, like it's essentials, 10 essentials of longevity, right? Is kind of the subtitle.
Mhm.
And so I wanted it to be short on purpose. I actually worked really hard to keep it that. I wanted it
Mhm.
to be something that would be engaging and helpful because I wanted it to be something that, an 18-year-old youth pastor could pick up and read, or a 22-year-old youth pastor could pick up and read. And somebody who's 40 years old who
Mhm.
needs to be reminded of some things or who is struggling or thinking about walking away or leaving or wherever in that spectrum people are. I want it to be practical and scalable and helpful and those things. So we ended up with this. And Lifeway was, gracious enough to publish, and they're an incredible partner in that process and helping do that. But I still have this other book out there looming in my head.
Ooh. All right.
We'll see if I
We
get
get
there. We'll
okay.
see
We
if
get
I
a
get
teaser on what it's going to be. Yeah.
there. I mean, I can tell you the gist, right? Like there's a proposal written. I don't know if the timing is right yet. It's essentially like almost like a choose your own adventure
Hmm.
type thing where let's talk about it's more on seasons of ministry. So where this one's essentials, there's seasons you're going to walk through in ministry. What does it look like 6 months in, a year in, 3, 5, 7, right?
Mm.
What about when you're single, married,
Mm.
married with mascots, little kids, married with kids in youth ministry, launching young adults? What does that look like? I mean, there are those kind of things. Ministry in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, and your 50s. It's very different in each one of those.
Yeah.
And so you might be in your 30s, married for a few years, but having your first kid. Oh,
Mm.
okay, well, let's read these chapters because these are going to really shape
Mm.
what you're doing. Or you might be 20 and single, but getting married. You need to recognize the shift that's about to happen because it's
Mm.
coming. Ministry in your 40s is very different than ministry in your 20s,
Yeah.
and it's in very unexpected ways. What does that look like? In student ministry specifically,
Mhm.
when everybody thinks you should be a real pastor and you're still, in their eyes, just a youth guy waiting on your promotion. I mean,
Yep.
So that's kind of the gist. It makes sense, hopefully, as I'm saying that. Before I even got to that, let's talk about the essential things you need in place.
Sure.
And that's where this book was kind of in the front end of that. We'll see. We'll see.
Cool. Yeah.
I mean, it's there. It's just not there yet.
Sure. Well, and it seems like both incredibly important because there is so much different context in all those different situations, but also, I mean, that sounds like a lot of work to,
Yeah.
to figure out
Yeah.
what needs to be said in each of those situations.
Well, and the question is always, will anybody read it? Right. I mean,
Sure.
that's what every publisher wants to know. And
Yeah.
so I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. So for now, I'll just teach on it at conferences when I'm asked.
Sure. There you go. There you go. Well, Jody, I've told you I love this book. I mean, it helped in a lot of my research as I was diving into a lot of longevity and turnover intention this year. And as I read it, you were you're a big piece of a portion of the article that I wrote as well that hopefully is going to be coming out in the next couple months. And like you said, it's a short book, 125, 126 pages. So very easy to read for youth pastors. It's on the go all the time. I love everything in the book. I love how the concept behind it, how you structured it, the contents, the discussion questions. It's at each of the chapters as well. How did you decide? Like, I love hearing like how it all came to be. Like, how did
Yeah.
you decide these 10 things? This is how we're going to structure it. All those things.
Yeah. I think I just started with a list, like, okay, if I had to say, what are the things that really matter? Like, because there's a lot you could say, oh, this will help. But if you had to have what would those be?
Mm.
And landed, on probably a little more than 10, but some of them were similar. 10 felt like a good round number, to be honest. There's not a lot of, look, we've all done this. Okay. Don't judge me if you're listening. We've all thought of a really cool t-shirt design and said, we're doing that. We're going to do an event around that theme.
Sure.
We have nothing else in mind except a t-shirt. So, there was just kind of here's the things that I think are important. And then really what order, because the order is intentional.
Mm.
I want to walk through a real order, even in some of the sections and how those are laid out. And it really started with some things that I feel like are often assumed, right? So we're going to start and talk about your salvation and your calling because everybody skips past that.
Mm.
I wanted it to be practical and pragmatic, but I think the largest section in the book is section 1, and that's all about your personal, yourself. If you've missed that, then nothing else matters because I'm convinced you can do ministry for 2 years without Jesus. Like, I just think you can. In our world, especially today, you can buy enough lessons. You can cheat your way with AI. You can do enough things. You can play enough games. You can find enough things on TikTok. But after 2 years, you run out of ideas. And people have gotten to know you and you're getting to know them, and it's going to get really hard. So let's not wait until the 2-year mark. Let's figure it out. And so that's kind of the gist, in terms of section and layout. Discussion questions actually came late. That was a suggestion by my editor. I thought about it and then I didn't really do it. And then, so we added those. I'm really glad we did because, I think if like I'm about to launch, we're recording this in December. I'm about to launch a book club within, kind of the longer haul stuff. We're going to read it together and we're going to talk through some of those discussion questions. My hope is if you're reading this in a Bible college class, you can use those as well. Or if you're reading it by yourself, I think we're really good at reading things quickly and not stopping to process. And so I think those will be helpful. And then maybe my favorite chapter is the last chapter, which I don't think anybody will ever read. And so I really had to fight for that one in terms of where it would fit. And I just think if I were going to sit down and have coffee with somebody, the last chapter is probably the chapter that the conclusion is probably what we would talk about. And so, so that's kind of how we landed on that. The order was kind of moved a little bit on a couple things, but in the end, we wanted a really intentional order that would walk people through a journey of kind of understanding.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I love it. Like, I think this could be even good. And, like you said, with different book clubs and things, I'm thinking of youth ministry networks that could go through this together. And, it's not overwhelming to read one chapter every time you meet and, go through the questions together.
I mean, I'm quoting Nacho Libre and Bill and Ted. This isn't like your deep theological.
Sure.
Like when we went to pull the quotes and stuff, and I'm like, oh, geez, these are. Yeah, I bet they've never cited these quotes before in a book at Lifeway.
Oh, it's fun. It's a youth ministry book. That's what it needs to be.
That's right. Oh, and I
Yeah.
wanted it to be that, I wanted
Yeah.
it to be for youth pastors. Structure is similar. I mean, like every chapter is going to start with a quote and then a bit of a story to kind of set up where we're headed, and then kind of the practical,
Mhm.
kind of meat of the chapter with some questions on the back end. And
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
think for me, that's what I like. And so I'm like, well, if I like it, I'll write it. If they like it, they'll read it.
Yeah. There we go. Well, I really like it. And I do like how you really, I mean, of these 10, they landed in 3 main sections. And
Yeah.
so and those actually really match up with some the recent research that I've done, especially around the things that are under our control. There
Yeah.
are a lot of things that are in our circumstances that are out of our control, but what are the things that we can actually have control over in our own lives? And I want people to read your book, so we're not going to deep dive into every one of the 10, but I thought maybe just like a 5,000-foot kind of overview of the 3 main concepts we
Yeah.
could do on this episode. So let's start. You started into it just a little bit ago, but why are core convictions so important to longevity?
Yeah. I think core convictions, if I were going to say, what is the thing that derails longevity most? It's in these first 5 chapters of core convictions, right? I mean, when you start talking to people or you're watching people walk away from ministry, it really comes down to probably the things in these first 5. The back half probably gets you fired. The front half is why you'd quit, right?
Mhm.
And we were talking about before this. I joke all the time. Really, the secret to longevity is pretty easy. Don't quit and don't get fired. If you can avoid those 2 things, you can stick around for a really long time. And the first half, that first section will keep you from quitting, right? And so it's things like your salvation. Again, an assumption we make, but I'm tired of sitting at youth camps or in chapel services and watching people who are in ministry give their life to Jesus because they peddled a message for a really long time. They never quite owned themselves. And so let's start there. Don't skip this chapter. Let's begin here. And if you are confident in your salvation, if you are certain of your salvation, great. Then let's be reminded of the beauty of it, of the good news, of the powerful nature of it, because that's what we're hoping to see in all of our students that we're trying to minister to, right? So we
Mhm.
start with salvation, we step into calling. Calling will keep you from quitting when everything else is telling you you should. I mean, it just is the thing. That conversation with my pastor in that musty old basement in that brick church has kept me in ministry more times than I can count. And I'll even say this year has done the same. I mean, that the calling piece has been really instrumental in me staying in ministry and specifically into student ministry. Chapter 3 is talking about your personal walk. Again, I think it's easy to assume that because you're studying often to teach that your walk is vibrant, or because you can pray on stage that your prayer life is strong. I think most listening would probably say that's not true for them in large seasons.
Mhm.
And so let's minister out of a place of a real strong, vibrant personal walk. Healthy rhythms. What does it look like to rest well? How do you navigate the rhythms of ministry that comes? This might be the easiest thing to do in student ministry in terms of these, but it's the one we don't really pay attention to. And so we talk through what that looks like and how do you maintain and establish those. And then expectations, being clear in expectations. I talk about this in the book, but this one almost cost me my marriage. And so how does that look like? Where are the expectations coming from? Who has them? How do you make sure you're clear on yours, they're clear on theirs? What causes the confusion of that? And so I think that one's really key as well. But those 5, I mean, those are really foundational. I
Mhm.
mean, if you're amiss on any of them, you run the risk of of losing it all.
Yeah. Yeah. When I think so often we ministry leaders in general, we get in this place where we're trying to make sure the people that we're leading are doing these things.
Yeah.
But so often we're probably failing in one or more of them. So what's helped you, I guess, focus on those things in your own life?
Yeah, I think the longer I'm in this and the more you watch people disqualify themselves, the more you realize I need to anchor myself to
Hmm.
something strong. And I need to have the, it's funny because really outside of maybe the call to ministry here in these first few, these are the things we would wish for every student that we minister to.
Sure.
right? So I just want to live that out. I want to be a faithful believer before I'm a faithful minister. And this is what that's going to take. And I'm convinced that if I'm a faithful believer, I'll make a better minister.
Mhm.
I want to pour out of a
Yeah.
full cup. I want my
Yeah.
ministry to be an overflow of what's happening in my own life.
Mhm.
And full transparency, there's seasons where that's really easy, and there's seasons where it's not.
Mm.
And there's long dry seasons where you just do it because you're supposed to do it, and you don't want to be here and you don't want to do this today, but this is what you're going to do because it's what God's called you to do. And you're going to trust that God can draw a straight line with a really crooked stick.
Mm.
And you watch him do it. It's also the scary part because God will use you to do his will when you're personally outside of it,
Yeah.
but he won't do it forever.
Mm.
And then you run the risk of undoing all the things that he's tried to do while he was patiently waiting for you to get your crap together.
Mhm.
And so I think if you're serious about longevity, you've got to start with yourself. You need to be healthy. You need to be spiritually healthy, you need to be physically healthy, you need to be mentally healthy, you need to be emotionally healthy, relationally healthy. All those things matter. And so that's kind of where that first section really lands itself. And it's a good chunk of the book. I mean,
Mhm.
rightly so.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting too, I think, because probably I don't think I'm a lot alone in this. We look at a book like this and we're like, okay, let's, how do we structure our ministry right? And how do we do all these things? And you start off with, okay, where's your salvation? And
Yeah.
so it's like, okay, I think I know who Jesus is already, but I think it's the right place to start. It's not what we
Yeah.
want to hear all the time because we want to, okay, how we structure things,
No.
but
Yeah.
it's about here. It's about inside us. Where are we as followers of Jesus before we are a leader?
Yeah. And if look in the introduction, which again, most people will probably skip, I say, don't skip these chapters.
Yeah.
Like I get it. Like at least if you read it through the first time, when you revisit, then you can revisit wherever you want.
Mhm.
Right. But they are here for you on purpose. And I didn't just need to add extra pages. And so, well, I guess I can add a chapter on salvation. No, man, we started there on purpose.
Mhm.
And again, you might be very, very certain of your salvation. I hope you are. But dang it, if you're listening to this, you can become callous to the gospel that you proclaim.
Mhm.
You know it. You get more excited about your next event than you do the opportunity for life change this
Mhm.
coming Wednesday night.
Mhm.
You just do. You get more excited about the wreck that you're going to plan for camp than how you're going to present the gospel.
Mhm.
And it may not always be that way, but it just happens because we see numbers at the event
Yeah.
that overshadow the change that takes so long in real discipleship.
Mhm.
And so you got to be reminded of the beauty of what God's done in your life and what he's trying to do in others. So don't skip past it. Same thing with calling. I mean, if you're not confident in that and you're not convinced of your calling, what are you doing? Are
Yep.
you just doing this for fun? You're filling a gap until somebody else can do it? Like maybe, but I don't think that's true for most of us. And it's easy when it gets hard down the line to forget the impact of your calling and the moment of your calling, you know?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. JD, I think that'd be enough. But you kept on
Yes.
going. And
That's right.
so
Yeah.
so this next section you talk about consistent leadership. So what do you mean that consistent leadership can lead to longevity?
Yeah. So the next section really talks about leading from vision. And I define that because a lot of people will define mission, vision differently. So
Mhm.
for the sake of us, we'll talk about what that looks like. I think everything that you do well is going to come from clear and careful leadership from vision. And so if you can articulate that and identify that, everything else gets easier. Again, so even in this section, we're going on purpose, right? It's like you go back to that first section. If you're certain of your salvation, everything else gets easier. Well, if you're careful and clear on your vision and be able to lead from that, everything else that flows from that gets easier. And so what does it look like then to lead from vision? What does it look like to build a team? You're not like you can't do this. Of all the chapters in the book, this chapter on building a team is probably the most pragmatic and practical. If you're sitting here and you're like, I know I need a team, but I don't know where to start, or I can't really get people to say yes to serving. I believe with everything in me, this chapter will change that for you.
Mm.
I wanted to be uber practical in all of these. And so in the vision chapter, here's how to craft that. Here's the difference. Here's what it looks like in building a team. Here's how to identify the needs you have. Here's how to ask with vision. So people say yes, not just to helping, but to being a part of your team. Like, here's how to do that. And then the next chapter in that section, the last chapter is communicating. What does it look like? There's kind of 4 ways we need to communicate. You need to communicate up, you need to communicate down, you need to communicate in, and you need to communicate out, and who that goes to and what that looks like.
Mm.
Again, this will help you keep you from being fired, which is helpful. It'll also help people buy into what you're
Mm.
doing, and it provides for you then consistency of leadership that people know, okay, that's what Steve does. This is who Steve is. I can trust Steve because Steve is consistent.
Mm.
He's not all over the place. He's not freaking out all the time. He's not chasing the next trend or the next fad. He's not like always begging. I don't have to run from him in church because he's always asking me to serve the next lock-in. No, this is who Steve is. And so I can trust him because I can see the consistency of his leadership. And
Mm.
that just earns massive trust.
Yeah, that's so true. And I've had the opportunity to speak into, I think, several people who are in the process of starting ministries or restarting ministries. And I've had the opportunity to do that a couple times. And so sometimes they ask me, what do we do in the beginning? And now I can have a book to hand them, but I'll also say, yeah, focus on your team, focus on
Yeah.
building that team, because you can only do so much on your own, and your capacity is only so big. But if you're able to build a team to come around you, and that team's strong, they bought into the vision, man, God's going to do some great things through you collectively. But if you're
Yeah.
just trying to lone soldier it, yeah,
Yeah.
you're
You're
going to
not
burn
going
out.
to do it. And the reality is not everyone's going to like you. And you're not
Right.
going to be good at everything. You
Mhm.
want them to, and you want to be, but it's not going to happen. So more adults who love Jesus and love students around students is better. They need to connect with somebody, and it doesn't have to be you. You're
Right.
not going to be good at everything. That's great. Do the things that only you can do and find the things that others can't. Identify those and then win people to that. And
Mm.
that will make you better. It'll make them better because they'll have purpose in your ministry. They'll be empowered to do it. And you'll make your students better because they have more people investing in them at a greater capacity. That's a win, win, win all day long.
Absolutely. Well, and in your last section talks about continued commitment. So what kind of continued commitment results in longevity?
Yeah, I mean, this is the not quitting part, right? And
Mm.
so as well, it really just how do you continue to learn? Because you're never going to arrive there. You're never going to get to a place where you're like, that's it. I know it all. I'm here. How do you keep learning? How are you staying up to speed on the constant changing culture and pressure of things? How do you continue to deepen your own understanding of your theology and scripture? What does that look like? Why is that even important? And so what does that mean for you as a minister who wants to be in this for a really long time? And then honestly, the last one is just, hey, be committed to stay. And what does that look like to really be committed to stay, not just to say it, but really, because when we talk about longevity, we're kind of talking about in 2 veins, Steve. Like, one is I want people to step into a calling towards student ministry, run towards a generation everybody's running from, and I want them to do that for a really, really, really long time. I want you to be in youth ministry for a long time. I also want you to be at a place and experience longevity for a long time. As long as the Lord allows, I want you to be there, and I don't want you to undercut or shortcut or quit what God's trying to do there. And so, yeah, be committed to stay, be continuing to learn and grow and get better at what you do, perfect your craft. The longer you do it, the better you're going to become if you're intentional about it.
Mm.
You're going to be more comfortable in front of volunteers. You're going to be more comfortable in front of parents. You're going to be more comfortable and better at asking people to serve with you. You're going to be better at communicating things to your senior leadership. You're gonna be better at planning events. You're gonna be better at managing budgets. You're gonna be better at, all of these things the longer you do it. If, and only if, you are trying to be better
Mm.
and improve. Some things you'll get better at just because you keep doing it, but you'll also keep making the mistakes if you're not trying to learn.
Sure.
And so be humble enough, set your ego aside, and do what you can to keep learning.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you and I were talking just a bit ago before we hit record that student ministry is constantly changing because
Yeah.
culture is constantly changing and teenagers are constantly changing. And we really are on the front lines of a lot of those changes. And so that's another reason we just need to
Yeah.
continue to learn and continue to soak up everything we can. Because if not, what we did 5 years ago or 10 years ago in youth ministry is not going to work today or
That's right.
tomorrow or next year or whatever.
No, man, give me a kid with an eating disorder. I would love that today.
Yeah.
Like I say that semi joking, but I remember the first kid
Mhm.
I had an eating disorder. I'm like, oh my gosh, what do we do? How do we? Now I'm like, oh, okay, this
Yeah.
isn't as bad as others. I
Hmm.
can deal with it. We can walk this out. And it's still a very serious thing. I'm not trying to make light of it, but like the issues that these students are walking through have become so complex.
Hmm.
And here's the challenge for some, not all of us, because some of us, I won't, we're older. We've doing it. We got a little more gray we've earned. But if you're in your 20s and you're leading this ministry and you're dealing with issues of gender and identity and suicide and depression, and I mean, let's go down the list. Parents, families splitting in parents and abuse. And I mean, just we could go on and on and on and on and on and
Hmm.
on and on. Like you're out of your depth, whether you want to admit that or not. I was out of my depth in my 20s. It's why this book exists, right?
Hmm.
And your senior leadership has not dealt with that because it's new. So
Yeah.
you are probably younger in ministry than most on staff, less experience in ministry than most on staff, less life experience than most on staff, and having to deal with the heaviest issues that your church is facing as someone on staff. Holy moly. Like that's crazy pressure
Hmm.
and mad props to you, right? So you better be learning. You better be talking. You better leading it. It's why podcasts like this are so great. It's why what you do with, the National Network of Youth Ministry is so important. Having someone that you can look to learn from, a cohort to jump in, a youth pastor across town to grab lunch with. It's why you should be looking at the research that's coming out. I think of Center for Parent Youth Understanding and the stuff out of Fuller, the Youth Institute, and the Barna research that comes. And I mean, there's so much good research and places to look and learn from today. You need to be pursuing that because you're plowing a field and a path at a very young age and in a very young tenure of ministry that no one before you has. And so that's a lot of burden to carry. And I don't want you to crash and burn,
Hmm.
so keep learning, keep leaning in, look for things, and then communicate those things well, going back to the chapter before. And so that you have the buy-in from the leadership and the parents and the volunteers and the students and your family and all those things to how best to support you.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jody, I don't know if you felt like this when you started, but I think when I first felt that call into student ministry and started, I just wanted to hang out with teenagers. I just wanted to tell them about Jesus and
Yeah.
realizing that it's so much more than that. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I was a teenager, right? I had a kid in my youth group 6 months younger than me. I'm 45. He is also 45. So, if we thought it was fun, we did it. That
yeah,
was what that was the metric. There was no, "Is this safe? Will this do it?" And I was
yeah,
so passionate about seeing students give their life to Jesus. I was a bull in a china shop for the gospel. And that meant that I wasn't always great with parents, and I wasn't great with leadership above me. And I kinda had this rebellious, like, we're gonna figure it out and take the and I did more damage in those early years than I needed to because I didn't know any better, right? I just was like, it's it the and the cost of not doing student ministry well, I understood and felt the weight of that, but it was very limited. I didn't understand the full breadth of the cost of what was at stake. And so I could have been so much more effective if I had known more. I just didn't know to do it. I was hung up on things that someone could have helped me with and I couldn't get to the next thing. I'm like, gosh, I just need more small group leaders. I can't. Why does nobody want to serve with me? Well, it's because you're, disorganized and chaos, and you You're really good at things that you don't empower others well, and so no one knows what to do, and you can't describe it. You don't have clear vision, and you're trying to be trendy and cool, which is off-putting and to others. And it's just I go down the list of all the mistakes that we all make.
Hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be that way. You can learn and do it well early, because here's the reality: your charisma and your gifting in the world will carry you. But if your charisma outpaces your character, none of this will last, and it ain't gonna matter.
Mm.
And it doesn't matter how great you are at communicating. Honestly, it matters very little how great you are at communicating. Should you be good? You should try to be better. But what you say and how you say it and how cool that clip was on TikTok or Instagram that you posted, or how great your live stream is on YouTube, doesn't matter nearly as much as you think it matters. What
Yeah.
would be more impactful is you having a grandmother who's walked with Jesus for 56 years, who can sit down with a group of junior high girls and talk about what it looks like to live out their faith while she's teaching them to sew pillows,
Mm. Yeah.
because they'll never forget that.
Yeah.
And so teach well, but empower others around you. Don't discount people who you may not see as a potential person to pour in and invest. Just surround your students with people who love Jesus. And yes, it's messy, and yes, it's hard, and yes, it's difficult, but man, you can do this. You can do this. But don't think for a minute that it matters what you wear or how well your stories are communicated, or if you got that clip, or how often you post yourself teaching on Instagram or TikTok. None of that matters.
Mm.
None of that matters.
Yeah.
You feel like it does, but it just doesn't matter. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. The big room is important. The big room is important, but it's one piece of a much bigger pie for
Right.
influence and longevity.
Mm. That's so true. And I know in my, 26 or so years as well, I feel like I could probably count on maybe two hands, if I try hard, the amount of sermons or messages that have truly impacted a student. They've come and told me, and it's like changed their life. But I'd run out of fingers quickly if I started listing all the times where students have told me, oh, my small group leader did this and my small group leader did that. And I had this person invest in me in this. And we went camping, or we went hiking, or we did all these other things. That's what like is truly impactful ministry.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I have to remain humble for that.
That's right.
Because like, I'd love for them to say, oh yeah, I love what you said, Steve. It's really changed my life. But in reality, that needs to be someone else.
The reality is this: there was a study that came out and a long time ago, right? It was published in a book called Why They Stay. And this book, or the research in this, was focused on students who stayed in their faith after they graduated. What were the metrics, right? And one of the things that came out was it doesn't matter how much students like their youth pastor. It made nominal, if any, it made none. It almost made no difference, which is crazy if you're a youth pastor.
Yeah.
Because you're like, but I want them to like me. Well, yeah,
Right.
that's it. It's good if they do. But of the things that are going to move the needle, how cool you are, not going to do it, man. But they are going to remember if you showed up at their middle school band concert while your ears bled out.
Yep.
They are going to remember if you went to their water polo match, not understanding the rules and just watching people try to drown each other. They are going to remember, like those are the things they remember. It's life. Discipleship at the end of the day is life. When you read the New Testament, what you find is most of the stories of lasting impact that we see with Jesus and the disciples were not him preaching a sermon. They just weren't. They were him doing ministry with them, bringing them along. And he had some good ones. He had good sermons. He had some good ones.
Mhm.
But what he modeled for us is that the stage is less important than we think.
Yep.
And so, and I think my teaching and preaching gift is really high. I love doing it. I will do it anytime I'm asked and anywhere I can. I find it incredibly life-giving. I think God uses it. I think the preaching of God's word is still meant to be the primary focus of worship service together. So by no means, when you hear me say this, do you hear me diminishing the role of solid preaching and teaching, or that the word doesn't matter.
Hmm.
And I'm also not being like, oh, it's the relationships that matter most. It's a both and deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a both and you got to recognize that early, or you're gonna not last.
Totally. Well, as I said, I'm a huge fan of the book, and I really hope people read all of it, especially the conclusion, which is the part you say that you think maybe people will jump over. So I hope they don't. So don't forget to read that part. But one of the quotes is right near the very end that I just wanted to end with today. It says, "If you try to go it alone, you'll give up and walk away. Don't forget
Yeah.
you're not alone, and don't give up." So this podcast is all about ministry leaders trying to connect them together and grow together. So why is connection with others and not doing ministry alone so important?
I think it's easy to sit in a difficult season and feel like you're the only one who's in a difficult season. It's easy to sit and think, I'm the only one. You know, no one else feels like this. You're listening to podcasts like this one, you're looking at YouTube videos, you're scrolling through Instagram, you're seeing the highlight reel of every other minister, all the clips of everybody preaching to these large rooms, and you're like, God, man, what am I doing? And that's not real life. That's not real life. And so I think being in a community of people where you can be encouraged that, oh, we're all struggling in this together. And you begin to see wins in ways that you wouldn't have if you weren't celebrating them as a group, learning from each other, as we said earlier, encouraging each other. We're just not meant to do life alone. I mean, we're just meant to do life in community. And oftentimes in youth ministry, again, you might be the younger person on staff. You find it difficult to relate and be friends with other staff. You might struggle in your church to find close friendships in your church, although I think you can find them and you should, much to what others might say.
Hmm.
I think, you can just isolate yourself, and isolation never, never seems to go well in ministry. It just doesn't breed health. So what does it look like then to be in it with someone else who can pull you up when you're down, who can push you when you need to be pushed, challenge you when you're being, a dork and you're making excuses, who can, just remind you that what you're doing matters, that there's people who are depending on you, that can hold you accountable. I just think you'll give up. You'll just drift alone and you'll just give up if you don't have people around you. So being in a community, being in a network, it's really, really important. It could be a youth pastor across town. It could be a network of people across, the country. It's probably not a Facebook group, probably not a Facebook group, but it might be, I mean, you just need people. You need to be reminded of why you do what you do,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So, and then I didn't say this earlier, but I'll say this about the book. The very last thing in the book is the appendix,
Mhm.
and just 7 reasons you should leave your ministry. And it feels maybe weird that it be in a book that I'm trying to convince you to stay. But I know this, the reality is many people listening to this right now, or many people who might pick up the book might want to stay, or they might be thinking of leaving. And they're struggling with, because Steve, you've had these conversations. Do I stay? Do I go? Is it okay?
Mhm.
When do I know? How do I know if I'm supposed to leave? And so I just wanted to say, hey, here are 7 legitimate reasons. If you are in these situations, you're thinking about leaving, weigh them against this. And if you come out on the other side of this and be like, yes, this is what God's doing, then don't feel guilty about that. Like, I'm not trying to guilt you into staying. I think, again, I've been in multiple places, multiple parts of the country. I would be hypocritical if I said you should never, ever leave and go somewhere else. I do believe that God does things. I believe situations get crazy. I think your health can suffer. I think there's a lot of reasons in that. So if you've listened to nothing else, you listen to this whole thing, and you're like, that's great, but I still am going to quit. Buy the book and read the last chapter. And that's not because that's not because I'm trying to sell you a book. I'm trying to help you. The book was written to help you stay, but I also want you to be able to navigate, what does it look like if I should leave? And so
Mhm.
that's there as well. And so you get the chapter nobody will read, but everybody should, and then the appendix, which most people probably don't need to read, but some could. And I think, again, the hope is that the book is helpful regardless of where you find yourself, in what season you're in, what context you're in. And so I added that in the back as well.
Cool. Well, again, the book's Staying Power by Jody Livingston, 10 Essentials of Longevity in Youth Ministry. Jody, it's been awesome to have you on here today. People, I'm sure, are going to want to connect with you more. They're going to want to buy your book, they're listen to your podcast, check out your blog and all those different things. So where can people find you online and continue to connect?
Yeah. TheLongerHaul.com is the easiest place. Everything's there. Podcast is there. You can find the book there. Books on Amazon, books on Lifeway, books wherever. I don't know. Can't buy it at Barnes & Noble, I found out. But you can buy it everywhere else. So Amazon, I think it's there. Christian book, Lifeway, if you want to grab that. There's a link on the website too. But TheLongerHaul.com, you're going to find the podcast. You're going to find some of the blog entries. You'll find all the other things there. It's the easiest place. But yeah, I'd love to connect and help encourage any way I can. And man, I just want to say to you, thank you, Steve, for what you're doing. I know how much you care deeply about this and helping youth pastors and youth ministers stay in it, and the number of youth pastors you're investing in, not just to this podcast, but across the country, particularly there in your area. And man, it matters, right? It matters a lot. So thanks for your heart for those who are running it, students, and for doing all this. I'm excited to see, and already even hearing some of the research and things you found. I'm excited to see that as it comes out and how it helps others stay. So thanks for having me on, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I want to give you an opportunity to maybe share anything else that maybe the Holy Spirit just puts on your heart to share with our audience as we close out today.
Yeah, I'll say this. You can do this, right? It may not feel like it, but you can do it. And you might be in a season where you feel like God has been very unkind to you. You might be in a season where you're thriving. You might be just tired and burned out. You can do it. If God called you to it, God will carry you through it. And it might not feel like it in the moment. That's not just some, saying. Like, find some encouragement. Get counseling if you need it. Don't be afraid of that. Run towards health, whatever that looks like for you. Don't fight for balance. It's a myth. Run towards health and healthy seasons. Pour into those that you've done. This is an incredible thing we do. The stakes are very high. Your teens need you, and you're doing better. You're doing better than you think you are. You're doing better than you think you are.
Thanks for that. Well, Jody, as I said, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and so great to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for being on. Thanks for your book. Thanks for all the other resources that you have, and we just pray that God continues to bless your ministry.
Yeah, man. Thanks again for having me on. It's been a blast.
Thank you so much for being here for this episode. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to leave it a positive review and share it with another student ministry leader. The link to Jody's book and his podcast will be in the show notes for this episode, as well as on our website at studentministryconnection.com. And if you do check out his podcast, you may notice a familiar voice on episode 151, as Jody and I talked about burnout, especially after a full season like summer. And if you'd like to support this podcast, you can make donations to my ministry with National Network of Youth Ministries at nnym.org/Steve Cullum, or just follow the link in the show notes. And if you'd like to book me or any other great speakers for your next youth group event or training, check out Youth Ministry Hub's Speaker Hub at youthmenhub.com/Speaker Hub. Again, that link is going to be in the show notes. As I said earlier, this next episode marks our 10th anniversary of the podcast. So make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcast app, and also follow us on Instagram and Facebook so you don't miss out on the festivities. And if you want to be featured in that episode, please be sure to send an email or a voice memo to studentministryconnection@gmail.com. And until next time, be sure to stay connected, and may God bless your ministry.